And now we're ready to go. All right, so our agenda for the meeting today, we're going to have a brief introduction from some members of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center to talk about what they do. We're going to talk about the importance of women to understanding our history. We're going to talk about what is a citizen research project and how individual citizens can help research and preserve history. And we're going to talk about what resources the Worcester County Library has for researchers. So to introduce the Maryland Women's Heritage Center, we have two of their staff members on our Zoom that I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to speak. We have Kathy Santora, who's the president of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center, and Diana Bailey, who's the executive director. So I'm going to go ahead and let each of them have the floor for a minute. All right. So I'm thinking that this is Kathy. All right, can we hear you?
How about now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, actually, fabulous. Well, thank you for having us. It's always a treat to be on Maryland's Eastern Shore, even if it's virtually. Again, I'm Kathy Santora, president of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. And I want to thank Linda Lindsay, who is one of our longtime supporters, as well as Jennifer Rank and all of her staff at the Worcester County Library for making this program about how to be a citizen researcher come together. You know, we do get questions about how we find out about the women who we feature. And once you know, it's not mysterious if you know where to look, and the local library is always the right answer. The Maryland Women's Heritage Center is the only organization in the state and one of the few in the country that is completely devoted to telling and preserving women's stories. We have in-person and online programs like this one, research projects, and special events. Now, the people who come to this webinar by researching and then sharing your own stories about women from your communities, you can do what we do, which is to add her story to history to tell our story. Visit our website, join our mailing list, and follow us on social media to stay in touch and learn about memorable Maryland women. Thank you, and I believe that the executive director, Diana Bailey, also has a few words to share.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, Kathy. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Diana.
Hi, everyone. Hi, this is Diana Bailey, and I too wanted to thank the Eastern Shore Women. Linda Lindsay has been with us for years and years, and we've talked about different things we could do with some of the fabulous women and smart women on the shore that are trying to tell her story from the counties on the shore. But I also want to shout out to Sherry Snyder, who's from Mountain, Maryland. I think she's on the call today as well. And with Judy Carbone, basically started this project in Western Maryland, and we were able to share some of the outline and the framework with our colleagues on the Eastern Shore. So it's wonderful for the Maryland Women's Heritage Center to be able to reach across the state and to be able to, again, add her story to history to tell our stories. So thank you so much for including us, and we're looking forward to our next adventure. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to both Kathy, Diana, and everyone else with the Maryland Women's Heritage Center for reaching out to us and giving this opportunity to participate in your program. So go ahead and move on to the next slide. So you may be asking, what is a citizen researcher? So a citizen researcher is an amateur or non-professional who helps collect, analyze, or organize information on a topic to aid professional organizations or help further information and understanding on a particular topic. You may have also heard the term citizen scientist used in different fields. This is kind of similar to that, but with a more historical research lens. So our goal for this citizen research project is to compile information on famous, prominent, or influential women from Worcester County to help highlight their importance to our overall history. So our goal is to compile biographies of these women from different researchers and share this information on our website and on our social media through our Throwback Thursday posts, highlighting some of the history and historical resources from the library and from Worcester County as a whole. And our goal is to make this information accessible to other researchers or people who may not know this history. Those who are interested can also submit their biographies for consideration for the Maryland Women's Heritage Center's Women's Hall of Fame, which is featured on their website. After this month, we'll have monthly meetups to be held in person here at the branch to help meet fellow researchers, get tips and encouragement from each other, and to work on these biographies or any other historical or genealogical research projects that you may need some help with. So the first step when you're starting your citizen research project may be trying to figure out what woman to research. So there's no wrong answer for this. You might want to start looking at a family member or ancestor who's native to this area. You may be interested in finding a woman who has a similar background in subject matter or field you're interested in, such as a scientist, an author, or an artist, or a founding member of an organization you are a part of. Our goal is to have biographies that feature women from all different backgrounds and experiences. So we're looking for people from all different types of women. There are some challenges that come with researching women that you might not run into when you're researching men or male ancestors, as well as some challenges that you'll come across whenever you're doing any sort of research. So some of the specific challenges towards researching women are that since women had fewer legal rights than men, there weren't as many records created for them, especially the further back you go. Women were often not listed by their own name in records as well. You'll often see a Mrs. Husband's name rather than the woman's name. If the woman was married multiple times, it can make it more difficult, or if any of their husbands had multiple wives, searching Mrs. Husband's name may come up with multiple women. If a woman's husband is unknown, it's likely that she also doesn't have as many records about her. Or on the opposite hand, if her husband was super famous, searching for her husband's name may bring up a whole lot of information about him that you have to sift through to find information about her. In general, if you're looking for a woman who lived a long time ago, very early records may have been lost, burned, or hard to search for. And if the woman you're searching for has a common name, it may be hard to determine if a record is related to her, especially early in your search process. And if you've done research in Worcester County, you'll know that there's a lot of names that crop up very frequently, so it can be hard to tell who is who. All right, so now I'm going to go through a little case study of a woman that I started researching to give an example of how you may use our resources here at the library, and in general to put together a biography of a woman that you're researching for the Citizen Research Project. So I decided that I wanted to find information about an early librarian in Worcester County. As I'm a librarian, I found it interesting. So newspapers are often my go-to first step when I'm beginning research. I really like newspapers because they give accounts of events as they're happening, and can be a good way of getting more personal or smaller scale events rather than the big facts from different governmental records. The Worcester County Library has a really large collection of newspapers that have been digitized from our microfilm collections. These are all available online and span from 1881 to 1973. So if you're looking for a woman who lived in Worcester County during that time frame, it's likely that she was mentioned in the newspaper. The newspapers are also really great because through OCR, or optical character recognition, it makes it a lot easier to do some initial searches than looking through some books. So I started by searching just the word librarian in our newspaper and sorting by the earliest records. Most of these newspaper clippings that I'm going to show are from the Democratic Messenger newspaper that was published right here in Snow Hill. So the earliest records talking about a librarian in that newspaper are from 1910 to 1919. And I was able to learn that Snow Hill had its first circulating library in 1910, and the Mrs. M.M. North was the librarian from 1910 to 1913. In 1913, the library was closed and all books were moved to the Snow Hill High School Library. So this is really awesome. Since it was the first circulating library, this was likely the first librarian in the Snow Hill area. So now that I have a name, Mrs. North, I searched the digitized microfilm newspapers for that M.M. North. This brought up a whole bunch of different information about her family, her activities in town, and different other organizations she was a part of. So I'm going to go through and break down some of the information I learned from searching M.M. North. We were able to see that she has a daughter named Mrs. McLaughlin that lived in Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. She visited her daughter a lot, so they had probably a close relationship, but oftentimes there's only her, not her husband, visiting him. So it's possible that he had either died prior to these 1902, 1903 articles, or he had a very busy job that made it hard for him to travel. She also had several brothers and sisters who lived in Seattle, Washington, including a sister, Elizabeth Linehart, that lived in Washington, D.C. That newspaper article here on the right, referring to her sister, Miss Elizabeth Linehart, helps us learn that Mrs. M.M. North's maiden name was Linehart. We also found in some articles from 1902 to 1908 that Mrs. M.M. North was in charge of a book club in Snow Hill called the West End Book Club. The club would meet Monday evenings at her home to exchange books. It's possible that since this was right before she was chosen as librarian, that this interest in books and engagement in the community led to her being chosen as the librarian. A lot of the other articles mentioned Snow Hill High School. It's possible that she was a teacher or was just heavily involved in their programming. She was especially interested in flag or patriotic related activities, such as running flag drills or saluting the flag exercises. She was also very involved in the local churches and local church organizations. She was involved in the Women's Missionary Society of the Newcastle Presbytery as an executive board member. She attended Macomb Memorial Presbyterian Church right here in Snow Hill and assisted the churches in the town of Snow Hill with the 4th of July celebration, including being a chairman of the planning committee, as well as being a member of the Home and Foreign Societies of the Synod in Baltimore. In addition to that, she was also a founding member of the Worcester County chapter of the Red Cross, which was founded in 1910. She remained the chairman until at least 1912. This was the first Red Cross chapter on the Eastern Shore. And she was also a member of the Empty Stocking Club, which was part of her role as the state president of the International Sunshine Society for the state of Maryland. It was an offshoot of the Sunshine, didn't realize that was a difficult word to say, society that made sure that everyone had full stockings for Christmas, and they met at Mrs. North's club house in November and December. So as you can see, she was a very involved woman, including, in addition to those, we also saw information about her being a secretary and founding member of the Snow Hill Improvement Association, member and president of the Women's National Press Association, as well as many, many articles saying Mrs. M.M. North went to go visit friends in Stockton. Mrs. M.M. North went to go visit friends in Berlin. And while these newspaper articles may seem a little silly and something you might end up skipping over, these can be a great resource to seeing who some of their different associates were, which can help lead you to finding relatives you might be able to talk to for information about that person, or just see if they were involved in their community. I'm going to take a quick drink of water, move on to the next slide. When searching for M.M. North, one of the most interesting articles I came across was this article about the Macomb Memorial Presbyterian Church and its history. In this article, it mentions an M.M. North wrote it, as well as a Mrs. Mary M. North. Since it's about Macomb Presbyterian Church, which we all know she's a member of, I'm thinking that this is probably the same person, but I'm not 100% sure. So I wanted to do some searching on Mary M. North to see if I can determine if Mary M. North and Mary M.M. North are the same person. So when I searched Mary M. North in our newspapers, I found mentions of a daughter, Mrs. McLaughlin in Washington, D.C., some work with the Red Cross, and running the West End Book Club. So these different facts help me prove that Mary M. North is M.M. North. So if you're unsure about if two articles are referring to the same person, make sure that you save all of them. And then if you can find information that helps corroborate your idea that they're related, you can put those in your pile of good articles. Searching Mary M. North, of course, brought up a whole bunch more information. I won't go through all of it, but she was in even more clubs, if you can believe it. She was also the founding member and worthy matron of the Electra chapter of the Order of the Eastern Star, president of the American Women's Press Association, member of the Women's Relief Corps, GAR, and a ton more organizations. I also learned that she was a published author. So in 1903, Mrs. North wrote a book titled The Prairie Schooner, or Schooner. It was a romance book set in the plains of Kansas. When I was looking at the 1903 newspapers, I didn't initially see anything, but there was an article published in 1938 about it. The Democratic Messenger had a column in the paper called Olden Days in Worcester, a weekly staff feature. This section of the paper highlighted events that were published in the paper 5, 10, even 50 years ago. This is a great resource that, because some of the original articles mentioned in this column may have been lost, hard to read, or skipped over from the search bar because the computer may not have been able to read it. So definitely don't skip over the olden days section because it can give you some good insights. I was able to find the book just by a quick Google search of Prairie Schooner, Mary M. North. So don't discount Google searches when you're doing your searches. I was able to find the whole book on the Library of Congress, including a dedication in the book to her daughter, Theodora North McLaughlin, telling us her full name, as well as a picture that may have been of Mrs. North. And then the last article that I'm going to talk about related to Mrs. North is her obituary. Obituaries are really great to find, even if they're a little bit sad sometimes, because they have a whole lot of really great information about a person's past and any descendants and activities they have. So on the left, I have Mrs. North's obituary that was published in 1933. And on the right, I have her husband's obituary that was published in 1928. If you can find the husband's obituary, it's also really great because it will include some information about their children or other descendants as well. So what we learned from this is that her husband was Reverend Joseph B. North, who was pastor of Macomb Memorial Church, Macomb Memorial Presbyterian Church. So this shows how she was very involved in the church, as well as why he was so busy all the time. She had 2 children, Dr. J. Beverly North and Theodora North Philly, who was Mrs. Paul C. Philly. So it's likely she was married to a McLaughlin earlier in the 1900s, and then sometime before 1928 married Mr. Paul C. Philly. It includes more information about the different clubs she was involved in, including being a member of the editorial staff of the National Tribune, part of the General Federation of Women's Clubs, and organizer of the Women's National Press Association. It also includes information about her burial. Her funeral services were held at Washington Heights Presbyterian Church. It was officiated by Dr. John C. Palmer, pastor, and she's buried in Congressional Cemetery in Washington, D.C. So this is a whole lot of information, but obituaries, as you can see, are a great resource, so it's really important to being able to try to find them. Especially women, it can be a little bit tricky to find their obituaries, so here's a couple of tips on how you might be able to find those obituaries that might not come up when you just search for a woman's full name. So you can try searching for her husband's name. For example, if we were trying to find Mrs. North and it wasn't coming up, you could search for any variation of Joseph B. North, Joseph North, J.B. North, Reverend North, or any other combination of those. If you know her maiden name, you could try searching just the maiden name and the married name. This can be useful if it lists any survivors of siblings or children or parents that might have the maiden name. You can also, if you know the sibling, parent, or child's name, you can search for those. If you know any nicknames or alternate spellings of her first name, those can be very useful to search because especially the further back you go, the less standardized spelling was. So if you're searching for a Catherine with a C, you might want to try searching for Catherine with a K, Catherine with a Y in the middle, Kate or Katie. You may also try searching for her last name and the name of the cemetery that she's buried in or a funeral home. Or if you don't know those, if there are any cemeteries that her family members are buried in, it's likely that she's buried in that as well. You can also try searching for communities that they lived in previously, not just where they died. For example, Mrs. North died in Washington, D.C., but I found her obituary in a Snow Hill newspaper as she was very involved in the Snow Hill community. They still published her obituary there. If you do know the date or date range that you're personally researching past, you can also try skimming through the newspaper as the OCR reader is good, but not perfect. So it's possible the obituary is in there. It's just not coming up from your searches. Okay, so going through all those different sources, I was able to come up with a little biography. And this is an example of what your biographies might look like that we would publish on our website and in our social media. So we see that Mrs. Mary M. Linehart was born in 1852. She married Joseph B. North and was very involved in the Snow Hill community. She was in a bunch of different organizations, including being a founding member of several of those. She passed away on January 2nd, 1933 in Washington, D.C. So you can include more information if you're able to find it. If you're not able to find as much information, any sort of biography is useful. So if I want to do some further searches to get more information on my woman, or if you're looking for more information, there's a couple of different avenues you can take as well, besides just searching for her name. So looking at schools or universities that they attended is a great way of finding some more information. It's possible that a library or a historical society has records on them, as well as a lot of colleges and universities have their own internal archives that include information. If you know the church that they attended, it can be a great way of finding information as well as any former workplaces or organizations they were part of, such as historical societies, Lions Clubs, Gardens Clubs, etc., as well as searching for any relatives that you know of, such as children, siblings, spouses. For example, if you don't know a woman's maiden name, a lot of times that maiden name is published on the birth record of their children or would be used as a middle name for one of their children. So looking at their relatives could be a great way of finding information about the person you're researching as well. So now I want to go ahead and talk about a couple of the other resources that we have available at the library here that could be useful for doing some research for our citizen research project, as well as genealogy as a whole. So one of our most popular resources is our Ancestry Library Edition. It's likely that you're already familiar with Ancestry if you've done any sort of historical or genealogical research. This can be accessed inside any Worcester County Library branch from our patron computers or by signing into our Wi-Fi from your own personal device. Any of our Zoom participants, if you're not native to Worcester County, it's likely that your local library also has a copy of Ancestry. Ancestry Library Edition is great because it includes many records, including censuses, draft cards, marriage indexes, social security indexes, and more. These records are a great way to confirm vital information, such as those birth dates, death dates, and marriages, as well as family connections. The library edition has all of the records that you would find in a paid personal account. You're just not able to make a family tree on it, but you can view other people's public family trees that they have made available. As long as you double check that they have their facts straight, these can also be a good resource for finding more information. And here's an example of just one of the pages that you might come across on Ancestry. These are some of the censuses. So you'll see that they have the actual photograph of the record, as well as they've broken out that information into a more easy to read and easy to search text format. And you can find more information from some of these records than you would expect. For example, the census does not just say where they lived and who they lived with, but this one includes information about their occupation, as well as their father and mother's birthplaces, whether they're able to read and write, and more information that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Another great resource that we have here at the Worcester County Library is our archive collections portal. These are different collections that were donated by different researchers or organizations in the past and cover a wide range of different topics, such as, and have documents, photographs, and other records related to people and life in Worcester County. So if I wanted to do some more research on Mrs. Mary M. North, a couple of the ones that I might try to look at are our Snow Hill Women's Club records, since she did love a club and lived in Snow Hill. Our Snow Hill High School collection to try to confirm if she was actually a teacher and if she attended Snow Hill High School. Those could be a great resource. We have the Style Shop records, which was a shop located here in Snow Hill of women's clothing. So it's possible that she was a customer there, and we might be able to find some information from her there. And the annual church conferences collection, which included information about different meetings of Eastern Shore Methodist churches. Since she and her husband were very involved in the church, it's likely there might be some information about her there. So this is just a few of the collections that we have in our archive collections. It ranges wildly from financial records, old photographs, yearbooks. So definitely take a look at this page and see if there's anything that's related to your woman or any of the organizations or schools or hobbies that she had. So once you click on one of these archive collection portal links, it'll take you to a page that gives you more information about where we got it from, who we got it from, what types of topics and information are located in this collection, as well as a full inventory list of the items available in there. Some of these have been scanned and are available online, which I'll tell you about in just a minute, but any ones that aren't, or if you prefer to view them in person, you can always contact us to be able to view those in person. So some of our records have been digitized. We've been putting them up online on a website called Catalog It. This is what the homepage looks like. We currently have over 1,000 items that have been digitized on here. You can see some of our collections include our American Field Service collection of financial papers, a collection related to a musician and composer from Worcester County. Once you click on those records, you see all the records in that collection, and clicking on an item blows up the image and gives you more information about where we got it from, who's in the picture or document, and more information such as that. We're working on trying to get more of these available online, especially for our long distance researchers. We know that having things online can be a huge help. Some more of our photos have also been posted on our Flickr page. A lot of photos of the library on here. So it is a great resource for seeing what the libraries looked like as far back as 70s and 80s. We also have some of our other photograph collections posted on here as well. Another one of our resources that I think is especially valuable for those researching women is our Oral History and Folklife portal. This includes oral histories that were recorded by Worcester County Library staff during the 1970s and 80s as a way of preserving the idea of what life was like in Worcester County around the turn of the century. We have these transcribed so you can read them, or the audio format is available as well to listen to. So if your woman lived in Worcester County around that time period, we may have a recording of her talking about early life, or recordings from people who had lives very similar to her growing up. We also have a lot of family files and research notes compiled by local genealogists on different families. These are available to view either in branch or have been scanned and are available as PDFs. This includes information that is compiled by last name. So any of the families that are local to here, you're likely to find some information on them here as well. And then one last resource that I wanted to highlight is not actually through the library, but is a free online resource that I find very useful for genealogical research, is a website called Find a Grave. This is a user-generated website that compiles information about cemeteries and burial places throughout the world. There's a lot of really good information about people buried in Worcester County. It'll often include a photograph of their grave, or you can get a lot of really good information from what is carved into the gravestone, as well as pictures of the cemetery, information about where they're buried and who they're buried next to, which can likely give you information about their relatives, as well as connections of their parents and spouse and children listed below. And oftentimes people will put in the photographs some of those records as well, which can be a good way of finding obituaries or death records that you might have a little bit more trouble finding as well. Okay, so now that I've gone over some of our online resources, we do still have resources in person that are available at the library. At all of our Worcester County branches, we have a Maryland room. These include books, which include things such as family histories, local history, censuses, wills, marriage records, and our family files. We also have some different magazines, which include information on Maryland genealogy, including articles and facts from different genealogical and historical organizations. We have our Pitts land records that give information about who owned land where in Worcester County. We have some vertical files, which compile different documents and articles on different topics related to different aspects of life in Worcester County, as well as that archives collection we talked about that you can view in person, and our local history librarian, me, who's able to come answer any questions that you might have on any genealogical or historical research that you're doing. So that's definitely a lot of information and different ways that you can use our library resources for your citizen research project. If it seems a little overwhelming to do all that research, there are other ways that you can be a citizen researcher and help out with our local history research. So one of those ways is by helping us identify some photographs. So our library is very fortunate to have a large photograph collection that covers a wide range of topics and time periods. Unfortunately, not all of those photographs are identified, and that can be a huge bummer if someone's trying to use them for research or for a display. So some of our photographs, like you can see on the top row, are very old, so might be a little bit harder to identify, but some of them are quite recent, even as early as 10, 20 years ago. So it's likely there might be a picture of someone that you recognize. So if you're ever looking for something to do, you can look through our ID Help Needed People album on our Flickr page and send us an email or comment on that photo itself if you see someone or something that you recognize. Another great way that you can help is by helping us transcribe documents on our catalog page. So this is a very helpful way to help those who are unable to easily read the script to be able to use those resources. So you can see some of them are old-timey cursive that can be a little bit challenging to read. I believe this is a land record from the early 1700s, so definitely a little bit harder than what we're used to reading on the daily. But some of them are just newspaper articles that need to be transcribed. So text transcription is not only making it easier for us to read, but also easier for the computer to read. It helps us be able to search for documents more easily, both internally and if people are doing research online. So if you want to do that, you're welcome to type and send a transcription as a Word or PDF document. Send it to that email address, History at Worcester Library, and include the title of the document in there. So between researching different women to help showcase their history or any of those other things, being a citizen researcher is a great way of making sure that our unique Worcester County history and the history of women in Worcester County is preserved and able to be looked at by researchers in the future. So some final tips and takeaways are that research is a very long, sometimes difficult process, and it's okay to get discouraged sometimes or to ask for help. Searching for women and family ancestors has its own unique challenges, but it is an important part of understanding and interpreting our history. The library has many resources to be able to help independent researchers, and there are many ways you can be a citizen researcher and help with the preservation and understanding of Worcester County's unique history. So we're going to be having some monthly meetups. They're going to be held at 3 p.m. on the first Monday of the month in the Snow Hill Library. So that'll be November 4th, December 2nd, and January 6th. These meetups are to meet with fellow citizen researchers and genealogists for encouragement, community, and assistance. You don't have to come to all of them if you don't want to. It's a very open invitation to anyone who's interested in meeting up with other historians. And in those meetings, you can help, you can utilize our in-person resources or get tips on how to use our online researchers, meet with each other, or meet with me for assistance. So thank you everyone for coming, both in person and on Zoom. And thank you for your interest in our citizen research project and preserving the history of Worcester County. We're now going to open the floor for questions. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Yes. Okay. Yes. So a question asked in the chat is, are the slides going to be available as a PDF? Yes. For those of you who signed up for the Zoom, we have your email address and we'll send those slides out to you. Those who are in person, before you leave, if you give us your email address, we'll be able to send these slides and the recording over to you as well, so you can access these slides after this presentation. Okay. Okay, so if you didn't hear that, so a comment from Kathy over at the Maryland Women's Heritage Center is that if you're interested in getting your work published, that is also a possibility. Once we've done some of the research meetups, that publishing some of those biographies in a more formal context may also be a possibility as well. Does anyone in person have any questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kingdom Courthouse. Do you have anything for the Chancery? Or Otherwise known as equity, records over there? Sure that everything vision.
So the question was, do we have any Chancery or equity related files? That is a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I know we do have some different files that we've gotten from the courthouse records, so I will look into that and I can let you know about that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I'll look into if we have those. And if we don't, I'll look into seeing if that's a possibility for something we could add to our collection. Because I agree that sounds like a very useful resource.
Good house. Mostly it's when more than one person owns a piece of property and wants to sell it, but you have to account for everyone, particularly if somebody died. Right, I mean, that's the best.
Right.
A lot of that data.
And do you think that data goes back to like 1600, or do you think maybe that far?
The Chancery record would probably start here, like 20, before that.
Nice.
It would include also